The scalpel slipped. Blood erupted across the sterile field like a geyser. Hot, fast, unstoppable. Someone screamed. The heart monitor flatlined with a shriek that cut through the operating room like a siren, and for 3 seconds, nobody moved. Not the lead resident, not the attending, not the surgical tech frozen with clamps in both hands. Just chaos, just panic, just the kind of silence that comes right before a life ends. And then a voice, low, steady, impossibly calm, cut through it all. Clamp the proximal artery. Now. Everyone turned. It was her, the white nurse, the one they barely noticed, the one with pale skin, quiet eyes, and a habit of blending into walls. The one they called soft, weak, forgettable. Claire Harlow. She stepped forward like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. And when she reached into the wound, bare-knuckled, no hesitation, the bleeding stopped. No one understood how. No one knew what she really was. If you want to see how a woman they underestimated became the only one who could save them, stay until the end. Like this video. Comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happens next changes everything. Silvergate Medical Center sat on the edge of downtown like a monument to ambition. 14 floors of glass and steel, its name etched in chrome above revolving doors that never stopped moving. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and coffee that had been sitting too long. Nurses moved in tight circles. Doctors walked like they owned the hallways. And somewhere on the 3rd floor, in a supply closet that doubled as a break room, Claire Harlow sat alone with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She didn't mind the quiet. Quiet meant no one was yelling at her. Quiet meant no one was reminding her to stay in her lane or let the real professionals handle it. Quiet meant she could breathe. Claire was 32, though most people guessed younger. She had the kind of face that didn't demand attention. Pale skin, light brown hair pulled back in a low bun, blue eyes that seemed to look through things instead of at them. She wore the same navy scrubs as everyone else, but hers were always a size too big. She moved through the hospital like a shadow, soft-spoken, efficient, invisible. That was the point. Harlow! The door slammed open. Claire didn't flinch. Dr. Miles Brennan stood in the doorway, his white coat wrinkled, his tablet clutched like a weapon. He was the lead surgical resident, young, talented, and convinced the world revolved around his schedule. We need another set of hands in OR4. You're scrubbing in. Claire stood without a word. She left her tea on the counter and followed him into the hallway, her sneakers silent on polished tile. Just assist, Brennan said over his shoulder. Don't touch anything unless I tell you to. And for the love of, don't ask questions. Understood, Claire said quietly. He didn't look back. The operating room was already crowded when they arrived. 2 surgical techs, an anesthesiologist, and Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a sharp-eyed attending with a reputation for perfection. The patient was a 47-year-old man named Robert Finch, admitted 3 hours earlier with abdominal pain that turned out to be a ruptured spleen. Standard procedure. In and out. Except nothing at Silvergate was ever standard. Vitals? Dr. Okonkwo asked. BP 110/70. Heart rate 82, stable, the anesthesiologist replied. Claire moved to the back of the room, hands clasped, eyes on the monitors. She didn't need to be told where to stand. She knew. Brennan scrubbed in beside Okonkwo, his voice loud and confident. I've done 3 of these this month, textbook. Okonkwo didn't respond. She made the first incision with the kind of precision that came from 15 years of practice. Clean, controlled, perfect. For the first 20 minutes, everything went exactly as planned. Then the bleeding started. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a trickle. A small vessel nicked during dissection. Brennan reached for the cautery without hesitation. Got it. But the trickle didn't stop. Suction, Okonkwo said. One of the techs moved in. The blood pooled faster now, filling the cavity, obscuring the field. Clamp, Brennan said, his voice still steady, but his hands weren't. Claire saw it before anyone else did, the way his fingers fumbled, the way the clamp slipped, the way the blood didn't slow. It accelerated. Brennan, Okonkwo's voice had an edge now. I know. Clamp the bleeder. Now. I'm trying. The monitors started beeping, not loud yet, just insistent. Claire's eyes flicked to the screen, heart rate climbing, blood pressure dropping. Brennan's hands moved faster, but faster wasn't better. He grabbed the wrong instrument, dropped it, cursed under his breath. "Suction," Okonkwo snapped. "I'm suctioning." "Then suction harder." The blood kept coming. Claire's pulse didn't change. She stood perfectly still, watching, calculating. Her fingers twitched once, just once, but she didn't move. "Where's the source?" Brennan shouted. "Proximal splenic artery," Okonkwo said. "You nicked it during the dissection." "I didn't." "You did." The monitor screamed louder now. BP 70/40, heart rate 120. "He's crashing," the anesthesiologist said. Brennan's face went pale. "We need to clamp the artery." "Then clamp it." "I can't see it. There's too much blood." Okonkwo shoved him aside. "Move." She reached in herself, hands steady, eyes focused, but even she couldn't find the source fast enough. The cavity was a lake of red now, and the monitors were shrieking. "Flatline in 30 seconds, the anesthesiologist said. Brennan stepped back, hands shaking. "We need the chief. Someone call—" "There's no time," Okonkwo said. And then silence. Not real silence. The monitors were still screaming, the techs were still scrambling, but in that moment, everything felt frozen. Except Claire. She stepped forward. "Clamp the proximal artery." Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't harsh. But it cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone turned. "Excuse me?" Brennan stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Claire didn't repeat herself. She moved to the table, hands already reaching for gloves. "What are you doing?" Brennan's voice rose. "You're a nurse. You don't just—" "Step aside," Claire said. Okonkwo hesitated, then she saw Claire's eyes. Calm, focused, unshaken. Okonkwo stepped back. Claire slipped her hands into the wound without hesitation. No fumbling, no second-guessing. Her fingers moved like they had a map, like she'd done this in the dark, in the mud, in places where mistakes meant death. She found the artery in 4 seconds. "Clamp," she said. One of the techs handed it to her. Claire locked it into place with a single smooth motion. The bleeding stopped. Instantly. The room went still. "Suture," Claire said. Okonkwo handed her the needle. Claire stitched the vessel with the kind of precision that didn't come from textbooks. It came from muscle memory, from instinct, from 1,000 nights when there was no backup and no second chance. The monitors settled, BP rising, heart rate stabilizing. "Vitals?" Claire asked. "Normalizing," the anesthesiologist whispered. Claire pulled her hands out slowly, carefully. Blood dripped from her gloves, but her fingers were steady. She stepped back. Okonkwo stared at her. "Who taught you that?" Claire didn't answer. She peeled off her gloves and dropped them in the trash. "Harlow," Okonkwo said again. "Who taught you?" Claire met her eyes for just a moment, then she turned and walked out of the OR without a word. Brennan stood there, pale and shaking, staring at the space where she'd been. "What the hell just happened?" he whispered. Nobody answered. The hallway outside OR 4 was empty. Claire walked slowly, her hands still steady, her breathing even. She pushed through the doors into the scrub room and stood at the sink for a long time, letting the water run over her fingers. She didn't look at her reflection. She didn't need to. She knew what she'd see. The same woman who'd spent 6 years in the army. The same woman who'd patched soldiers in the back of a Humvee while bullets tore through the air. The same woman who'd held a man's aorta together with her bare hands because there were no clamps and no time and no other choice. The same woman who'd left that life behind and promised herself she'd never have to do it again. But some things didn't leave. Some things stayed in your hands. Claire dried her fingers on a towel and walked out into the hall. Behind her, in the OR, Dr. Okonkwo stood over the patient, alive, stable, breathing, and tried to make sense of what she'd just witnessed. "Pull her file," she said quietly. One of the techs looked up. "Who?" "Claire Harlow. Pull everything." By the time Claire reached the break room, her phone was already buzzing. 3 missed calls. 2 from administration, 1 from the chief of surgery. She didn't answer. She sat down, picked up her cold tea, and took a sip. Outside the door, footsteps echoed, voices rose. Find her. Where did she go? Someone get Dr. Kane, now. Claire closed her eyes. It was starting. Dr. Elliot Kane was the kind of man who made rooms quieter just by walking into them. Tall, gray-haired, with a voice like gravel and eyes that missed nothing. He'd been chief of surgery at Silvergate for 12 years, and in that time he'd seen everything, or so he thought. He stood in his office now, staring at a file that didn't make sense. Claire Harlow, registered nurse, 3 years at Silvergate, spotless record, quiet, competent, unremarkable, except for the section at the bottom. Previous employment, U.S. Army, 6-8W combat medic, 6 years active duty, deployed twice, Iraq, Afghanistan, honorable discharge. Kane read it 3 times. Then he picked up the phone. Get her up here, he said. Now. Claire sat in the hallway outside Kane's office, hands folded in her lap, expression unreadable. Nurses whispered as they passed. Residents stared. Word had already spread. The nurse who stopped the bleeding. The nurse who shouldn't have been able to. The door opened. Harlow, Kane said. Inside. Claire stood and walked in without hesitation. The door closed behind her. Kane didn't sit. He stood by the window, arms crossed, his back to her. You want to tell me what happened in OR4? He asked. A patient was bleeding out, Claire said. I stopped it. You stopped it, Kane repeated. You, a nurse. Yes. He turned to face her. You performed a vascular repair without authorization, without supervision, without him dying, Claire said quietly. Kane's jaw tightened. You had no right. I had every skill. The room went silent. Kane stared at her. You're a combat medic. I was. Why didn't you put that on your application? You didn't ask. Kane's eyes narrowed. You've been here 3 years. 3 years, and you never once mentioned... I didn't need to, Claire said. I was here to work. Not to prove anything. Well, you just proved something, Kane said sharply. You proved you're a liability. Claire's expression didn't change. Kane leaned forward. Do you understand what you've done? You overstepped. You violated protocol. I saved his life, Claire said. That's not the point. Then what is? Kane slammed his hand on the desk. The point is, you don't get to decide when the rules don't apply. Claire didn't flinch. Kane exhaled slowly. You're suspended. Pending review. Claire nodded once. Understood. She turned to leave. Harlow. She stopped. Why didn't you say anything? Kane's voice was quieter now, almost human. Why didn't you tell anyone what you could do? Claire looked back at him. Because, she said softly, I didn't want to be that person anymore. She walked out. Kane stood alone in his office, staring at the file on his desk. And for the first time in 12 years, he had no idea what to do next. The news spread like wildfire. By the time Claire reached the parking garage, every nurse on the 3rd floor knew. By the time she got to her car, the residents were talking. By the time she turned the key in the ignition, the attending physicians were asking questions. Who was Claire Harlow? Why had she hidden what she could do? And why, after 3 years of silence, had she finally stepped forward? Claire drove home in silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the hum of the engine and the rhythm of streetlights passing overhead. Her apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen she barely used. The walls were bare except for a single photograph. Her and 3 other soldiers, dusty and exhausted, standing in front of a medical tent somewhere outside Kandahar. She didn't look at it often. She set her keys on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and sat on the edge of her bed. Her hands were still steady. They always were. That was the problem. People thought steady hands meant you were calm, that you were in control, that nothing rattled you. But Claire knew better. Steady hands just meant you'd done something so many times that your body didn't need permission anymore. It just acted. And that terrified her. Because the last time her hands acted without permission, she'd been kneeling in the dirt, holding a 19-year-old kid's intestines inside his body while mortars screamed overhead. She'd been whispering to him, stay with me, even though she knew he wouldn't. She'd been covered in his blood when the medevac finally arrived, and she'd climbed into that helicopter with his tags in her pocket and his name on her lips. Private First Class Daniel Reeves. She still remembered. She remembered all of them. Claire lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow they'd call her in. Tomorrow there'd be meetings, reviews, questions she didn't want to answer. But tonight, she was just a woman who'd saved a life. And that was enough. For now. The next morning, Claire's suspension became official. She received the email at 6 a.m. Subject line: administrative leave, effective immediately. She didn't read past the first paragraph. Instead, she got dressed, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the city wake up. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Okonkwo. "We need to talk. Call me." Claire deleted it. Another buzz. This time from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Janet Riley, Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the incident at Silvergate Medical. Please call at your earliest convenience." Claire blocked the number. She wasn't interested in being a story. She'd been a story once before. The soldier who came home. The veteran who transitioned back to civilian life. The woman who traded combat boots for scrubs and never looked back. Except she had looked back. Every single day. By 10 a.m., Claire's phone had 17 missed calls. By noon, there were news vans parked outside Silvergate. By 2 p.m., someone had leaked her name to the press. Mystery nurse saves patient after surgical crisis. Former combat medic suspended for heroic act. The headline made her stomach turn. Heroic. As if stepping in to save someone was heroic instead of just necessary. As if she'd had a choice. Claire turned off her phone and went for a walk. The city was loud, cars honking, people shouting, sirens wailing in the distance. She walked for miles, hands in her pockets, eyes on the pavement. She didn't notice the black SUV following her. Not at first. It wasn't until she stopped at a crosswalk that she saw it, parked across the street, engine running, windows tinted. Claire's instincts kicked in. She turned left instead of right, took a side street, doubled back. The SUV stayed with her. Her pulse quickened. She ducked into a coffee shop, ordered nothing, and sat by the window. The SUV pulled up outside. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, military haircut. He wore a dark suit and moved with the kind of precision that only came from training. He walked into the coffee shop, straight toward her. Claire didn't run. She just watched. He stopped at her table. "Claire Harlow?" "Depends," Claire said. "Who's asking?" The man pulled out a badge. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale, U.S. Army. Claire's jaw tightened. "I'm retired." "I know," Hale said, "but the Army doesn't forget its best." "I'm not interested." "You don't even know what I'm offering." "Doesn't matter." Hale sat down anyway. "We've been tracking you for a while, watching your work, waiting to see if you still had it." "Had what?" "The instinct." Hale leaned forward. "Yesterday you performed a vascular repair in under 60 seconds. No backup, no hesitation. You saved a man's life while everyone else froze. So? So we need people like you." Claire laughed, short and bitter. "I'm done with that life." "Are you?" Hale's eyes didn't waver. "Because from where I'm sitting, you just proved you never left." Claire stood. "This conversation is over." "Sit down, Harlow." It wasn't a request. Claire hesitated. Then she sat. Hale pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "There's a situation. Medical personnel embedded with a joint task force in North Africa. High risk, high reward. We need someone who can think under pressure, someone who doesn't panic. Find someone else." "There is no one else." Hale's voice was quiet. "Not like you." Claire pushed the folder back. "I left for a reason." "I know." Hale's expression softened. "I read your discharge paperwork. I know what happened to Reeves." Claire's hands went still. "That wasn't your fault," Hale said. "You weren't there." "No, but I've been where you were, and I know what it's like to carry names you can't forget." He tapped the folder. "This is a chance to save more, to use what you know, to stop running." Claire stared at him for a long time. Then she stood again. "I'm not running. I'm just done." She walked out. Hale didn't follow, but as Claire stepped onto the sidewalk, she felt the weight of the folder in her mind, and she hated that part of her wanted to open it. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Hale's words. You never left. Maybe he was right. Maybe she'd just been pretending. Her phone buzzed. Another text. This time from Dr. Kane. Hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. Be there. Claire typed a response. I'll be there. She hit send. Then she got out of bed, walked to her closet, and pulled out a box from the top shelf. Inside was her old uniform, pressed, folded, untouched for 3 years. Claire ran her fingers over the fabric. Then she closed the box and put it back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the fact that she'd even looked, that scared her more than anything. The hearing was set in a conference room on the 14th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a long table, 12 chairs. Claire arrived early. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, a plain sweater, nothing that screamed former soldier. She sat at the far end of the table and waited. Dr. Kane arrived first, then Dr. Okonkwo, then 3 administrators Claire had never met, then Brennan, pale and uncomfortable, avoiding her eyes. Finally, a woman in a navy suit entered, Director Simone Alvarez, head of hospital operations. She sat at the head of the table. Let's begin, Alvarez said. Kane cleared his throat. We're here to address the events of April 12th, specifically the unauthorized medical intervention performed by Ms. Harlow during a scheduled surgery. Alvarez looked at Claire. Ms. Harlow, do you dispute the facts as presented? No, Claire said. Do you acknowledge that you violated hospital protocol? Yes. And do you understand the severity of your actions? Claire met her eyes. I understand that a man is alive because of them. The room went quiet. Alvarez leaned back. Dr. Okonkwo, your assessment? Okonkwo hesitated. Technically, Ms. Harlow overstepped her role, but clinically, she performed flawlessly. The patient survived because of her intervention. If she hadn't acted, we would have lost him. Dr. Brennan? Alvarez turned to him. Brennan shifted in his seat. I made a mistake. I should have called for backup sooner. I should have... He stopped. She saved him. I couldn't. Alvarez nodded slowly. Ms. Harlow, why didn't you disclose your military training when you applied here? Because it wasn't relevant, Claire said. Wasn't relevant? I applied as a nurse. That's what I wanted to be. But you're not just a nurse, are you? Claire's jaw tightened. I'm whatever the patient needs me to be. Alvarez studied her for a long moment. Then she looked at Kane. Recommendation? Kane hesitated. Suspension stands, pending further evaluation. Further evaluation of what? Okonkwo said sharply. She did the right thing. She violated protocol, one of the administrators said. Protocol doesn't save lives, Okonkwo shot back. People do. Alvarez raised a hand. Enough. She looked at Claire. You're reinstated, effective immediately. Claire blinked. What? But, Alvarez continued, you'll be reassigned. We're creating a new position, trauma response specialist. You'll train our surgical teams on high-pressure interventions. You'll assist in critical cases. And you'll report directly to me. Claire stared at her. I don't want that. Too bad. Alvarez stood. You proved you're too valuable to waste. So you're going to do this job, and you're going to do it well. Understood? Claire didn't answer. Alvarez walked to the door. Meeting adjourned. Everyone filed out, except Claire. She sat alone in the empty conference room, staring at her hands. They were still steady. And she hated that. That afternoon, Claire returned to the hospital. People stared. Nurses whispered. Residents stepped aside when she passed. She didn't acknowledge any of it. She went straight to the ICU. Robert Finch was awake. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand. Claire stood in the doorway, watching. Finch saw her. He smiled. You're the one, he said quietly. Claire didn't respond. They told me, Finch continued. You saved me. When everyone else couldn't. Claire stepped into the room. How are you feeling? Alive. Finch laughed, weak but genuine. Thanks to you. Claire nodded. Just doing my job. No. Finch's wife stood. You did more than that. She hugged Claire. Claire stood stiffly, arms at her sides. When the woman finally let go, there were tears in her eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Claire nodded again, then she left. She walked down the hall, through the double doors and into the stairwell. And there, alone, She finally let herself breathe. Her hands weren't steady anymore. They were shaking. Because for the first time in 3 years, she'd let herself feel it. The weight of saving someone, the relief of not losing them, the fear that next time she might not be enough. Claire sat on the stairs and put her head in her hands, and for just a moment, she let herself break. That night, Claire received another text. From Hale, offer still stands. Think about it. Claire stared at the message, then she typed a response. I'm not interested. She hit send. But she didn't delete his number, because deep down, she knew. The war wasn't over, it had just followed her home. And the war had followed her home in ways she hadn't expected. The first training session was scheduled for Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Conference Room B, mandatory attendance for all surgical residents and attending physicians. Claire arrived at 6:50. The room was already half full. Residents clustered in groups, whispering. Attendings sat with arms crossed, skeptical expressions carved into their faces. Brennan sat in the back corner, staring at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Nobody looked at Claire when she walked in. She didn't care. She set her laptop on the podium, connected it to the projector, and waited. At 7 sharp, Dr. Kane entered. He didn't sit. He stood by the door, arms folded, watching. Claire cleared her throat. Let's start. The room didn't quiet immediately. A few residents kept talking. One attending yawned. Claire didn't raise her voice. She just waited. Eventually, the noise died. 3 days ago, Claire began, a patient almost died on this table because someone hesitated. Not because they didn't know what to do, because they didn't trust themselves to do it. Brennan's face flushed red. High-pressure situations don't wait for perfect conditions, Claire continued. They don't wait for backup. They don't wait for permission. They just happen. And when they do, you have 2 choices. Act or watch someone die. An older attending raised his hand. With all due respect, Ms. Harlow, we're trained professionals. We don't need a lecture on crisis management from a nurse, Claire finished. Her voice was calm, flat. You're right. You don't need a lecture. You need a demonstration. She clicked to the next slide. A surgical scenario. Blunt abdominal trauma. Massive internal bleeding. No imaging available. Decision time, 60 seconds. Dr. Brennan, Claire said, walk me through it. Brennan looked up, startled. What? You heard me. 60 seconds. What do you do? Brennan stood slowly. I'd stabilize the patient first. Fluids, blood products. Then imaging to... No imaging, Claire said. Patients crashing, BP dropping. What do you do? I'd call for the attendings in another surgery. It's just you. What do you do? Brennan's mouth opened, closed. I'd exploratory laparotomy? Why? Because I need to find the source. Where do you cut? Midline incision. Show me. Brennan blinked. What? Claire pointed to a mannequin in the corner. Show me where you'd cut. How deep? What you'd clamp first. The room went dead silent. Brennan walked to the mannequin, hands trembling slightly. He mimed the incision, hesitated over the placement. Too lateral, Claire said. You'd miss the aorta. Try again. Brennan adjusted. Better. Now what? I'd pack the bleeding. With what? You have gauze in your hands. That's it. Brennan stared at the mannequin. His jaw worked. I don't know. Exactly. Claire stepped forward. You don't know, because you've never had to make that call with 0 resources and a dying patient in front of you. You've been trained in sterile environments with backup plans and attending supervision, but real trauma doesn't work that way. She moved to the mannequin, her hands confident and precise. You go midline, fast and deep. You don't worry about perfect technique. You worry about speed. You pack the 4 quadrants. You clamp the aorta if you have to. You keep the patient alive long enough to get help. That's it. That's the job. The room was silent. Claire looked at Brennan. You're a good surgeon. You know the theory, but theory doesn't stop bleeding. She turned to the rest of the room. That's what this training is about. Not replacing your education, supplementing it. Because the difference between a good surgeon and a great one isn't knowledge. It's instinct under pressure, and instinct comes from repetition. An attending in the front row leaned forward. And you learned this instinct where? Iraq? Afghanistan? Both, Claire said, treating soldiers, treating whoever was bleeding. Claire's voice didn't waver. Soldiers, civilians, sometimes insurgents. Didn't matter. A bleeder's a bleeder. The attending nodded slowly. Respect. Claire clicked to the next slide. Let's run another scenario. By the end of the session, half the room looked exhausted. The other half looked hungry, like they'd just realized how much they didn't know. Kane approached as everyone filed out. That was effective. It was necessary, Claire said, packing up her laptop. They're not used to being challenged like that. Then they needed it. Kane studied her. You don't pull punches. Can't afford to. Claire zipped her bag. People die when you're polite. Kane almost smiled. I'm starting to see why the army wanted you back. Claire's hands stilled. Who told you that? Word travels. Kane's expression shifted. Lieutenant Colonel Hale called me yesterday. Asked about your performance, your reliability. What did you tell him? That you're one of the best we have and that you're exactly where you need to be. Claire looked at him. You told him no. I told him the truth. Kane's voice softened. You're not a soldier anymore, Harlow. You're a healer, and we need you here. Claire didn't respond. Kane left. Claire stood alone in the empty conference room, staring at the mannequin. You're not a soldier anymore. She wanted to believe that. She really did. The rest of the week passed in a blur. More training sessions, more skeptical faces slowly turning into focused ones, more scenarios that pushed residents to their limits. Claire didn't go easy on them. She ran them through hemorrhage control, airway management, improvised surgical techniques. She made them work with limited supplies. She timed them, pressured them, forced them to make decisions without backup. Some hated her for it. Most respected her. By Friday, the hospital grapevine had turned Claire into a legend. The nurse who'd been to war, the woman who could stop bleeding with her bare hands, the combat medic who didn't take shit from anyone. Claire ignored it all. She went to work, did her job, went home. But Friday night, everything changed. She was in the parking garage, unlocking her car, when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast, deliberate. Claire's instincts kicked in. She turned, keys gripped like a weapon. 3 men, young, hoodies pulled up, hands in pockets. Claire Harlow? The tallest one asked. Claire didn't answer. She just calculated. Distance, exits, weapons. We need to talk, the man said. Not interested. Claire opened her car door. The man stepped closer. You don't understand. Claire's hand shot out. She grabbed his wrist, twisted, and had him on his knees in 2 seconds flat. The other 2 froze. I understand just fine, Claire said quietly. You followed me. You cornered me. You made a mistake. Wait, the man gasped. We're soldiers. We served with you. Claire hesitated. The man pulled back his hood with his free hand. Young face. Scar above his left eyebrow. Familiar. Private Nash, he said, breathing hard. 3rd Battalion, you saved my leg in Kandahar. Claire released him. Nash stood slowly, rubbing his wrist. Jesus, you still got it. What do you want? Claire's voice was flat. Colonel Hale sent us, Nash said. He wants to meet. Tonight. I already told him no. He said you'd say that. Nash gestured to the other 2 men. This is Corporal Santos and Sergeant Vic. We all served under Hale. We all owe you. Claire looked at each of them. Faces she half remembered. Voices from another life. Why? She asked. Why what? Why does he want me so badly? Nash exchanged glances with the others. Because there's a situation, and people are dying, and he thinks you're the only one who can stop it. Claire's jaw tightened. He's wrong. Maybe. Nash's voice was quiet. But what if he's not? Claire stared at him for a long moment. Then she got in her car. Tell him I'm not interested. She started the engine. Nash leaned down to the window. The target's a field hospital. Remote, under-resourced. They're getting hit hard. Trauma cases they can't handle. Local staff's overwhelmed. They need someone who can train them. Fast. Claire's hands tightened on the steering wheel. It's kids, Harlow, Nash said. Civilian kids caught in crossfire. Hale needs someone who won't freeze when a 10-year-old's bleeding out. Claire closed her eyes. Nash stepped back. Meeting's at 10. Old warehouse on Porter Street. He'll be there. So will we. He walked away. Claire sat in the car, engine running, hands shaking. Kids. The word echoed in her skull. She thought about Robert Finch, about the life she'd saved, about the training sessions, about all the doctors who were learning because she'd stepped forward. She thought about the boy she couldn't save, the one whose name she still carried, Daniel Reeves. He'd been 19, almost still a kid. Claire put the car in reverse and drove out of the garage. She didn't go home. She drove east, through the city, past the industrial district, into the part of town where streetlights flickered and warehouses leaned like drunks. Porter Street was a dead-end road lined with rusted metal buildings. At the far end, light spilled from a half-open door. Claire parked. She sat in the car for 5 minutes, staring at the light. Then she got out. The warehouse was empty except for a folding table, 3 chairs, and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale. He looked exactly like she remembered. Tall, built like a man who still ran 5 miles before breakfast. Gray threaded through his hair, but his eyes were sharp. "You came," Hale said. "I'm listening," Claire replied. "That's all." Hale gestured to a chair. "Sit." Claire remained standing. Hale smiled faintly. Still stubborn. Still not interested in being recruited. "Fair enough." Hale opened a folder on the table. "But hear me out anyway." He pulled out photographs. Field hospital, white tents, dusty ground, exhausted medical staff. "This is Marisol Station," Hale said. "A civilian medical outpost in the Sahel region. They're treating refugees, locals, anyone who shows up. The staff's good, doctors, nurses, techs, but they're not trauma specialists, and lately they've been getting cases they can't handle." He slid another photo across the table. A child, maybe 8 years old, bandaged, eyes closed. "This girl lost her arm because the staff didn't know how to control arterial bleeding fast enough," Hale said quietly. "She lived, but she didn't have to lose the arm." Claire's throat tightened. "There have been 6 cases like this in the last month," Hale continued. "Kids, adults, people who could have been saved if the staff had the right training. Your training." "Send someone else," Claire said. "There is no one else. Not with your skill set. Not with your experience." Hale leaned forward. "You've trained soldiers under fire. You've worked with 0 resources. You've saved lives in conditions that would break most people. That's what they need. I have a job here, and you're good at it. But this," Hale tapped the photo, "this is bigger. This is stopping the bleeding at the source. Teaching people how to save lives so you don't have to keep doing it yourself." Claire looked away. "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. Just long enough to train the core staff, then you're done. You come home." "And if I say no?" Hale's expression hardened. "Then more kids lose arms, more families lose fathers, more people die because we didn't have someone good enough to teach the staff how to stop it." Claire's hands clenched. "That's not fair." "No, it's not." Hale stood. "But it's the truth, and you know it." He slid a contract across the table. "Think about it. You have 72 hours. Claire stared at the paper. Then she turned and walked out. Nash was waiting by her car. "You okay?" he asked. "No," Claire said. "You gonna take it?" Claire didn't answer. She got in the car and drove away. But the image of that girl, bandaged, small, fragile, stayed burned into her mind. The weekend passed like a fever dream. Claire went to work, ran her training sessions, answered emails, smiled when patients thanked her. But inside, she was unraveling. Saturday night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, the contract sitting on the kitchen counter like a bomb. Sunday morning, she called Dr. Okonkwo. "I need advice," Claire said. They met at a coffee shop downtown, quiet, empty, the kind of place where you could talk without being overheard. Okonkwo listened as Claire explained everything: the offer, the field hospital, the kids. When Claire finished, Okonkwo sipped her coffee and didn't speak for a long time. "What do you want me to say?" Okonkwo finally asked. "That I'm crazy for even considering it." "You're not crazy. You're conflicted." Okonkwo set down her cup. "You came here to leave that life behind. But that life keeps finding you, and part of you, maybe a big part, misses it." I don't miss it, Claire said sharply. Then why are you thinking about going? Claire didn't answer. Okonkwo leaned forward. You saved Robert Finch because you couldn't stand by and watch him die. You're training our residents because you can't stand the idea of them failing when it matters. You're considering this deployment because you can't stand the thought of kids losing limbs when you could have prevented it. That's not about missing the military, Claire. That's about who you are. Claire's throat tightened. I don't want to be that person anymore. Why not? Because that person loses people. That person carries names. That person... Claire's voice cracked. That person couldn't save Daniel Reeves. Okonkwo's expression softened. Who's Daniel Reeves? Claire looked away. A soldier, 19 years old, IED blast. I held his intestines inside his body for 20 minutes while we waited for medevac. He died 30 seconds after the helicopter landed. That wasn't your fault. I know. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. But I still see his face. Okonkwo reached across the table and took Claire's hand. Listen to me. You can't save everyone. No one can, but you can save some. And the people you save, they get to go home. They get to see their families. They get to live. That matters, Claire. That matters more than the ones you lose. Claire's eyes burned. What if I go and it happens again? What if I can't save them? Then you tried, and that's more than most people can say. Claire pulled her hand back. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Okonkwo said quietly. You just don't see it. They sat in silence for a while. Then Claire stood. I have to go. Whatever you decide, Okonkwo said. I'm with you. Claire nodded and left. By Monday morning, Claire had made her decision. She walked into Kane's office at 8 a.m. He looked up from his desk. Harlow, what's... I need a leave of absence, Claire said. Kane's expression shifted. For how long? 4 weeks, maybe less. This is about Hale's offer. Claire nodded. Kane leaned back in his chair. I told you, you're not a soldier anymore. I know, but those people need help, and I can give it. We need you here. You have other nurses, other trainers. They don't have anyone. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're really going to do this? Yes. Even though you just got reinstated, even though you're finally getting the recognition you deserve. This isn't about recognition, Claire said. It's about doing what's right. Kane stared at her, then he nodded. 4 weeks. That's it. After that, I want you back here. Understood? Understood. Claire turned to leave. Harlow? She stopped. Come back in one piece, Kane said. Claire didn't respond. She just walked out. That afternoon, Claire signed the contract. Hale called her an hour later. Welcome back, Harlow. This is temporary, Claire said. Understood. Transport leaves Wednesday. Be ready. The line went dead. Claire sat in her apartment, staring at the signed paper. She'd just agreed to go back to the one place she swore she'd never return, and she had no idea if she'd survive it. Tuesday was a blur of preparations. Claire packed light, 2 duffel bags, basic clothes, her old combat boots. She updated her will, called her landlord, left instructions for her plants. She didn't tell anyone except Okonkwo and Kane. Tuesday night, she sat on her bed and stared at the photograph on her wall. Her and her unit. Dusty, tired, alive. Daniel Reeves was in that photo, far left, smiling. Claire touched the frame. I'm going back, she whispered. I don't know if it's the right call, but I'm going. The photograph didn't answer. Wednesday morning, Claire stood in the parking garage with her duffel bags at her feet. A black SUV pulled up. Nash stepped out. Ready? He asked. No, Claire said. Nash grinned. Good. That means you're thinking. Claire threw her bags in the trunk and got in. The drive to the airfield took 40 minutes. They didn't talk much. Just the hum of the engine and the weight of what was coming. When they arrived, a cargo plane waited on the tarmac. Hale stood beside it, arms crossed. Harlow, he said. Colonel? Still having second thoughts? Third and fourth, Claire said. Hale almost smiled. That's normal. Get on the plane. Claire walked up the ramp. Inside, the plane was stripped down. Metal benches, cargo netting, no windows. A handful of other personnel sat scattered throughout. Soldiers, contractors, people who looked like they'd done this before. Claire took a seat near the back. The engines roared to life. The plane lifted off. And as the ground fell away beneath her, Claire closed her eyes and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. 14 hours later, the plane landed in a desert that stretched to the horizon. The heat hit Claire like a wall when the ramp lowered. Dry, oppressive, familiar. Hale walked down the ramp first. Claire followed. A convoy of trucks waited, dust-covered, armored. "Marisol Station's 2 hours north," Hale said. "We move now." They loaded into the trucks. Claire sat beside Nash, her rifle across her lap, a weapon she hadn't held in 3 years but still knew how to use. The ride was rough. Unpaved roads, rocks, heat shimmering off the sand. Claire stared out the window and tried to remember why she'd agreed to this. Then she saw it. A girl, maybe 10 years old, standing by the side of the road, waving. Claire's chest tightened. The convoy didn't stop, but Claire watched until the girl disappeared in the dust. Marisol Station was smaller than Claire expected. 3 white tents, a handful of trailers, solar panels propped up on wooden frames, medical supplies stacked in crates, and people everywhere. Refugees, locals, families with sick children, old men with wounds that should have killed them weeks ago. The staff moved like ghosts, exhausted, overwhelmed, running on fumes. Hale led Claire to the largest tent. Inside, a woman in scrubs looked up. She was in her 40s, thin, dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were stained with iodine. "Dr. Amina Toure," Hale said. "This is Claire Harlow, your new trainer." Amina's eyes swept over Claire. "You're the combat medic." "Yes," Claire said. Amina didn't smile. "Good. We need all the help we can get." She gestured to a cot in the corner. A boy, maybe 12. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, bleeding through the bandages. "He came in an hour ago," Amina said. "We stabilized him, but I don't know if it'll hold." Claire moved to the cot. She didn't ask permission. She just peeled back the bandages and assessed the wound. Clean entry. No exit. Bullet still inside. "You packed it?" Claire asked. "As best I could." Claire's hands moved with precision. She checked the pulse, the abdomen, the bleeding. "He needs surgery," Claire said. "Now." "We don't have an OR." "Then we improvise." Amina stared at her. "You're serious? Do you want him to live or not?" Amina hesitated, then she nodded. "Tell me what you need." Claire looked around the tent. Limited supplies, no sterile field, no anesthesia except local. She'd worked with less. "Clear that table," Claire said. "Get me gloves, sutures, and whatever painkillers you have. And find me someone with steady hands." Amina moved. Claire scrubbed her hands in a bucket of water mixed with iodine. Then she looked at the boy. He stared back at her, eyes wide with fear. "You're going to be okay," Claire said quietly. The boy didn't understand English, but he understood her tone. Claire pulled on gloves and stepped forward, and as the world narrowed to the wound in front of her, she felt it again. The instinct, the focus. The thing she'd tried to leave behind but never could. She was home, and she hated how right it felt. But before she could make the first incision, gunfire erupted outside, close, too close. The tent shook, people screamed, and Claire's hands, steady just a second before, went completely still. The first instinct wasn't to run, it was to assess. Claire's training kicked in before conscious thought could catch up. Her eyes tracked the sound, automatic weapons, AK pattern, maybe 200 meters out. The bursts were short, controlled, not panic fire. Someone knew what they were doing. "Get down!" Hale's voice cut through the chaos from somewhere outside. The tent erupted into motion. Amina dropped to the floor. A nurse screamed. Medical staff scrambled for cover behind supply crates and overturned gurneys. Claire stayed on her feet. The boy on the table stared up at her, eyes wide with terror. He didn't understand the gunfire. He just understood fear. Another burst. Closer this time. Bullets cracked against something metal outside, probably one of the trailers. The sound was sharp and final, like bones breaking. "Harlow!" Nash appeared in the tent entrance, rifle up, face hard. "We need to move everyone to the bunker." "I've got a patient mid-procedure," Claire said. "Then leave him." "No." Nash's jaw clenched. Harlow, we don't have time. Then buy me some. Claire turned back to the boy. Her hands were steady again. How long can you hold them? Nash stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You're seriously going to operate right now? He's got a bullet in his abdomen and he's bleeding internally. If I don't get it out in the next 10 minutes, he's dead anyway. Claire grabbed the scalpel from the tray Amina had prepared. So yes, I'm operating. Now get out there and do your job so I can do mine. For a second, Nash didn't move. Then he turned and ran. More gunfire. This time answered by return fire, heavier, more deliberate. The soldiers in the convoy were engaging. Claire blocked it out. She looked at Amina, still on the floor. Get up. I need you. Amina's hands were shaking. I can't. You can. Get up. Amina crawled to her feet. Glove up, Claire said. You're assisting. But the shooting isn't in here yet, and this kid doesn't have time to wait for it to stop. Claire positioned herself over the boy. Local anesthetic. Now. Amina fumbled with a vial of lidocaine. Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped it. Claire took it from her. Breathe. Focus. Just like any other surgery. This isn't any other surgery. It is if you treat it that way. Claire injected the lidocaine around the wound site. The boy flinched but didn't cry out. Brave kid, or maybe just too scared to make noise. Outside, the gunfire intensified. Voices shouted in languages Claire didn't fully understand. French, Arabic, something else. The sound of boots on sand, engines revving. Claire made the first incision. Blood welled up immediately. Not arterial, she would have seen the spray, but steady. Venous bleeding from a nicked vessel somewhere deep. Suction, Claire said. Amina grabbed a bulb syringe, no electric suction here, and started clearing the field. Claire's fingers worked quickly, opening the peritoneum, exploring the cavity. The bullet had entered just below the ribs, angled down, probably lodged near the spleen or kidney. Retractor, Claire said. Amina handed it to her. Claire spread the incision, peering into the abdominal cavity. There, a dark mass near the left kidney. The bullet had fragmented, pieces of metal embedded in tissue. This is going to take time, Claire muttered. We don't have time, Amina whispered. Claire ignored her. She reached for the forceps. A massive explosion rocked the ground. The tent shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Someone outside screamed. The boy on the table jerked, eyes rolling back. Stay with me, Claire said sharply. She tapped his cheek. Hey, look at me. The boy's eyes focused. That's it. Keep looking at me. Claire went back into the wound. Forceps in, gripping the largest fragment. She pulled slowly, carefully. The metal came free with a wet, sucking sound. One down. 3 more to go. Another burst of gunfire. This one so close Claire felt the vibration in her chest. Amina flinched. We need to evacuate. We're not moving him. Not like this. Claire, hold the retractor steady or I'm working blind. Amina's hands tightened on the instrument. Claire extracted the second fragment, then the third. The fourth was buried deep, wedged against the renal capsule. If she pulled too hard, she'd tear the kidney. If she left it, infection would kill him in days. She pulled. The fragment came free. Blood surged into the wound. Clamp! Claire barked. Amina slapped it into her hand. Claire clamped the bleeder, tied it off, and checked the rest of the cavity. No more fragments, no active bleeding. Irrigation, Claire said. Amina poured saline into the wound. Claire flushed out the debris, checking for any tears she'd missed. Clean. Suture. Amina handed her the needle. Claire closed the peritoneum first, then the fascia, then the skin. Fast but precise. Every stitch placed exactly where it needed to be. Outside, the gunfire stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. Claire tied off the final suture and stepped back. Bandage him. Keep him flat. Monitor for shock. Amina stared at the closed incision. You just did that. During a firefight. Claire peeled off her gloves. You would have too if you'd had to. I don't think I could have. You held the retractor. That's all I needed. Claire moved toward the tent entrance. Stay with him. I'll find out what's happening. She stepped outside into blinding sunlight and heat that hit like a fist. The camp was a wreck. Bullet holes in the trailers, shattered solar panels, blood in the sand. Hale stood near one of the trucks, rifle slung over his shoulder, talking into a radio. Nash and the other soldiers were spread out in defensive positions, eyes scanning the horizon. Claire walked over. Casualties? Hale looked at her. 2 wounded, no fatalities. You? Patient stable, for now. Hale lowered the radio. You operated during an active engagement. Didn't have a choice. That's insane. That's the job. Claire looked past him toward the desert. Who were they? Local militia. Maybe insurgents? Hard to tell anymore. Hale rubbed his face. They've been harassing the camp for weeks, testing defenses. This was the first time they actually engaged. They'll come back, Claire said. I know. When? Could be hours. Could be days. Hale met her eyes. We need to be ready. Claire nodded. Then we fortify. Set up triage protocols. Make sure the staff knows what to do when it happens again. You think it will? I know it will. Claire turned back toward the medical tent. This is just the start. She was right. Over the next 48 hours, Marisol Station transformed from a medical outpost into something closer to a combat hospital. Hale's team reinforced the perimeter with sandbags and razor wire. They set up observation posts, established radio protocols, ran drills, and Claire trained the medical staff. She gathered them in the largest tent, 12 people total. Doctors, nurses, a few local volunteers who barely spoke English but understood wounds. Listen up, Claire said. If you're here, you're going to see trauma. Real trauma. Not textbook cases, not controlled environments, the kind of injuries that make you want to quit. And you can't, because if you quit, people die. She pointed to a map of the camp spread out on a folding table. We're setting up 3 triage zones. Green for minor injuries, yellow for serious but stable, red for critical. If someone comes in and you're not sure where they go, assume red and call for me. A young nurse raised her hand. What if you're busy? Then you make the call yourself. Use your judgment. Trust your training. But I've never... You will now. Claire's voice was firm, but not harsh. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being fast. Fast saves lives. Hesitation kills. She ran them through scenarios, gunshot wounds, blast injuries, burns, amputations. She made them practice on mannequins, crude models made from sand-filled bags and old clothes, until their hands stopped shaking. Some of them were good, others were terrified. But they all learned. By the 3rd day, Claire had implemented a system. Color-coded tarps marked each zone. Supplies were pre-staged in crates labeled by injury type. A runner system kept communication flowing between zones. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. On the 4th day, a truck arrived with a family of 5. Blast victims from a village 20 kilometers south. The father was missing an arm. The mother had shrapnel in her chest. 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, had varying degrees of burns and lacerations. Claire triaged them in 90 seconds. Father, red. Massive blood loss, needed immediate vascular repair. Mother, yellow. Stable but needed surgery to remove the shrapnel. Children, green. Painful but not life-threatening. Amina, take the father, Claire said. I'll talk you through it. Amina's eyes went wide. I can't. You can, and you will. Claire pointed to the red zone. He's got a severed brachial artery. You need to clamp it, tie it off, and stabilize him. I'll be right here. Amina looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just nodded and moved. Claire turned to one of the nurses. Get the mother prepped for surgery. I'll handle it as soon as the father's stable. What about the children? Clean the wounds, bandage them, give them water. They're scared, not dying. The nurse nodded and moved. Claire watched Amina work. The older woman's hands were shaking, but she clamped the artery on the 2nd try. Not fast, but competent. Good, Claire said. Now tie it off. Double knot. Make sure it holds. Amina tied the suture. The bleeding stopped. The father's vitals stabilized. Amina stepped back, breathing hard. I did it. You did, Claire said. Now do it again when the next one comes in. Amina stared at her. You think there will be more? I know there will. And there were. Over the next week, casualties flooded the camp. Blast victims, gunshot wounds, children with infections that should have been treated weeks ago, old men with wounds that had festered into necrotic nightmares. Claire worked 18-hour days. She operated, she taught, she triaged. She saved who she could and held the hands of the ones she couldn't. The staff grew stronger, faster, more confident, but the attacks didn't stop. Twice more, militia forces engaged the camp. Twice more, Hale's team drove them back, but each time they got closer. Each time, the firefights lasted longer. On the 8th day, Hale called a meeting. Claire, Nash, Amina, and the senior staff gathered in the command trailer. The air inside was stifling. A single fan did nothing but move hot air around. Hale spread a map on the table. Intel says the militia's regrouping. They're planning a major assault. Could be tomorrow, could be next week. But it's coming. How many? Nash asked. 50, maybe more. The room went quiet. We can't hold against that, one of the soldiers said. We don't have a choice, Hale replied. Evac isn't an option. We've got too many patients who can't be moved. We stay, we fight, we hold. Claire looked at the map. The camp was exposed. No natural defenses, just open desert on all sides. We need a fallback position, she said. Everyone turned to look at her. If they breach the perimeter, Claire continued, we can't defend the whole camp. We consolidate. Move everyone to the main medical tent. Fortify it. Make it the last line. Hale studied the map. That could work, but it means abandoning the rest of the camp. Better than losing everyone. Hale nodded slowly. All right, we prep the fallback, but we hold the perimeter as long as we can. The meeting broke up. Claire walked outside into the fading light. The sun was setting, turning the desert red and gold. Nash joined her. You really think we can hold? No, Claire said, but we don't have to hold forever, just long enough. Long enough for what? Claire didn't answer. She just stared at the horizon. Somewhere out there, the militia was waiting, planning, preparing to hit them with everything they had. And Claire had no idea if they'd survive it. The attack came at dawn. Claire was awake when the first mortar hit. She'd been up all night checking supplies, prepping the fallback position, trying to anticipate what they'd need when everything went to hell. The explosion threw her to the ground, ears ringing, vision blurred, dust everywhere. She rolled to her feet, coughing. Incoming! Someone screamed. Another mortar, this one closer. The blast wave knocked over a supply crate, scattering bandages and IV bags across the sand. Claire ran toward the medical tent. Everyone to the fallback, now! The staff moved like they'd practiced, grabbing patients, hauling equipment, running. Gunfire erupted from the perimeter. Hale's team was already engaging, the crack of rifles mixed with the deeper thud of mortars. Claire reached the main tent. Amina was there, organizing the patients, her face pale but focused. How many? Claire asked. 14 critical, 23 stable, 6 walking wounded. Get the critical patients inside. Everyone else stays mobile. Amina nodded and started directing traffic. Claire grabbed her medical kit and moved to the entrance. From here, she could see the perimeter. Hale's soldiers were spread out, firing in controlled bursts. But the incoming fire was overwhelming. Too many shooters, too many angles. One of the soldiers, a young corporal Claire didn't know, stumbled back from the line, clutching his leg. Blood poured between his fingers. Claire ran to him. Down, now! The corporal collapsed. Claire ripped open his pant leg. Gunshot wound to the thigh. Arterial. Tourniquet, Claire shouted. Nash appeared, already pulling one from his kit. Claire applied it above the wound, twisting the windlass until the bleeding slowed. Get him inside, Claire said. Red zone. Nash dragged the corporal toward the tent. Claire turned back to the perimeter. Another soldier down. Then another. The militia was pushing hard. Too hard. Hale appeared beside her, face grim. They're trying to flank us. If they get around the east side, we're done. How long can you hold? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Claire's mind raced. 10 minutes wasn't enough to evacuate everyone. Wasn't enough to stabilize the critical patients. Wasn't enough to do anything except die slower. Then we don't hold, Claire said. Hale stared at her. What? We draw them in. Make them think we're collapsing. Pull everyone back to the fallback position. Let them take the perimeter. That's suicide. It's a bottleneck. They'll bunch up when they enter the camp. Your team can hit them from fortified positions. Claire pointed to the tent. We turn this into a kill box. Hale's jaw worked. Then he nodded. Do it. He grabbed his radio. All units, fall back to the main tent. Repeat, fall back. The soldiers started moving. Controlled retreat. Covering each other. Firing as they went. The militia saw the withdrawal and pressed harder. Dozens of fighters poured into the camp, whooping and firing wildly. Claire ducked into the tent. "Everyone down! Stay down!" The patients hit the floor, the staff huddled behind equipment. Claire grabbed a rifle from a rack Hale had set up, just in case, and moved to the entrance. The militia fighters were 50 meters out, 40, 30. Hale's voice crackled over the radio. "Wait for it." 20 meters. "Wait." 10. "Now!" The soldiers opened fire from concealed positions around the tent. The militia fighters ran straight into the ambush. Bodies dropped. The survivors scattered, trying to find cover that didn't exist. It was brutal, efficient, ugly. Claire didn't fire. She just watched. In less than a minute, it was over. The surviving militia fighters retreated, dragging their wounded. The camp fell silent, except for the groans of the injured. Hale stepped out from behind a barrier, breathing hard. "We held." Claire lowered the rifle. "For now." She turned back to the tent. The staff was already moving, triaging the wounded soldiers, preparing for the next wave. Because there would be a next wave. There always was. Over the next 6 hours, Claire operated on 11 people. Gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries. One soldier with a piece of mortar casing embedded in his skull. She removed it with forceps and a prayer. The militia attacked twice more. Each time, Hale's team drove them back. Each time, the cost was higher. By sunset, they'd lost 3 soldiers. 7 more were wounded. The medical supplies were running low. Claire stood outside the tent, hands covered in blood, staring at the horizon. Hale joined her. "We can't keep this up." "I know." "Evac's still not an option. Closest airfield's 200 kilometers. We'd never make it." Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What if we don't evac? What if we hit them first?" Hale looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "What? They keep hitting us because they think we're weak, defensive. What if we're not?" Claire turned to face him. "We know where they're staging. Nash told me. There's a compound 15 kilometers west. That's where they're coming from. You want to assault their base. I want to end this. We take out their command, their supplies. Make them think twice about coming back." Hale shook his head. "That's insane. We don't have the manpower." "We don't need manpower. We need surprise." Claire's voice was hard. "They think we're trapped here. They're not expecting us to come to them." Hale stared at her for a long time. Then he said, "You're serious?" "Yes. You're a medic, not a soldier. I'm both. And right now we need the soldier." Hale rubbed his face. "This is a bad idea." "You have a better one?" He didn't. Hale grabbed his radio. "Nash, Santos, Vic, command trailer, 5 minutes." Claire followed him inside. The plan was simple, maybe too simple. 6 people. 2 vehicles. Hit the compound at night. Destroy their weapons cache. Get out before they could organize a response. "It's a suicide mission," Santos said flatly. "It's the only mission," Claire replied. Nash looked at Hale. "You're actually considering this." "I'm considering that if we don't do something, we're all dead in 72 hours. Hale pointed to the map. "The compound's here, mostly undefended. They're sending everyone to hit us. We go in fast, plant charges, blow the cache. Gone before they know we were there." "And if it goes wrong?" Vic asked. "Then we die trying instead of waiting." Hale's voice was flat. "I'm going. Who's with me?" Nash raised his hand. So did Santos. Vic hesitated, then nodded. They all looked at Claire. "I'm in," she said. Hale shook his head. "No, you're needed here." "Amina can handle it. She's ready." "Harlow?" "I didn't come here to hide in a tent." Claire's eyes were hard. "I came here to finish this, so I'm going, and you can't stop me." Hale stared at her. Then he sighed. "Fine. But you follow orders. No heroics." Claire almost laughed. "You're one to talk." They left at midnight. 2 trucks, 6 people. Enough explosives to level a building. The desert was cold at night. Claire sat in the back of the lead truck, rifle across her lap, watching the stars. They were brighter here than anywhere she'd ever seen. No light pollution, just endless sky. Nash sat beside her. "You scared?" "Terrified," Claire said. "Good. Means you're smart." "You scared?" Nash grinned. "Always." The trucks rolled on in silence. 15 kilometers felt like 100. Every bump, every turn, Every shadow could be an ambush. But they made it. The compound was exactly where Intel said it would be. Low buildings, sandbag walls, a few guards smoking near the entrance. Hale cut the engines 200 meters out. They moved the rest of the way on foot. Claire's heart hammered in her chest. This was different from operating, different from treating wounds. This was hunting, and she wasn't sure she remembered how. But her body did. They reached the perimeter. Nash took out the first guard with a knife. Silent, efficient. Santos took the second. Inside the compound, it was quiet. Too quiet. Hale led them to a large building at the center. That's the cache. Plant the charges. 2 minutes. Nash and Santos moved inside. Claire and Vic covered the entrance. The seconds crawled. Then, voices. Claire's blood went cold. A patrol. 4 fighters, walking straight toward them. Vic raised his rifle. "Wait," Claire whispered. "If you fire, the whole compound wakes up." "Then what do we do?" Claire didn't answer. She just stepped out into the open. The fighters saw her, stopped, stared. Claire raised her hands. "Help, please, I'm lost." One of the fighters laughed, said something in Arabic, started walking toward her. Claire waited until he was close. Then she dropped her hands and Vic fired. All 4 fighters went down in seconds, but the damage was done. Shouts erupted across the compound. Lights flickered on. "Move!" Hale screamed. Nash and Santos ran out of the building. "Charges set, 30 seconds. They sprinted for the trucks. Gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets kicked up sand, pinged off metal. Claire ran harder than she'd ever run in her life. They reached the trucks, piled in. Engines roared. The compound exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the night sky. The shockwave hit the trucks like a fist. Claire's head slammed against the window. Stars burst across her vision. But they kept driving. Behind them, the compound burned. And in the firelight, Claire saw them. Fighters, dozens of them, pouring out of buildings she hadn't seen, running, shouting, coming after them. Hale floored it. The trucks tore across the desert. But the fighters had vehicles too, faster ones. "They're gaining," Santos yelled. Claire looked back. Headlights, getting closer. Hale grabbed the radio. "Base, this is Alpha. We're coming in hot. Prepare for contact." Static. "Base, do you copy?" Nothing. "Radio's dead," Hale said. Nash looked at Claire. "We're not going to make it." Claire stared at the headlights behind them, getting closer, closer. Then she saw it. A rocky outcropping, half a kilometer ahead. "There," Claire pointed. "Pull in behind those rocks. We make a stand. We're outnumbered 10-1. We don't have a choice." Hale yanked the wheel. The truck skidded to a stop behind the rocks. They jumped out, took positions, raised their rifles. The headlights closed in. 50 meters, 30, 20. Claire's finger tightened on the trigger. And then a sound. Low, rhythmic, growing louder. Helicopter. No. Multiple helicopters. Claire looked up. 3 Blackhawks appeared over the horizon, running lights blazing. Door guns opened up, hammering the pursuing vehicles with devastating fire. The militia trucks exploded, flipped, burned. In seconds, it was over. The helicopters circled once, then one of them landed 50 meters away. A figure jumped out, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale walked toward them. A second Hale, the one from the base, stared in confusion. Wait, Claire's brain caught up. Not Hale. Someone else. Someone higher up the chain. A man in a crisp uniform stepped forward, stars on his shoulders. A general. "Colonel Hale," the man said. "Stand down. You're relieved." Hale stared at him. "General Morrow? Your operation's over, all of you. Get on the birds. Now." Claire didn't move. "What about the camp? The patients?" Morrow looked at her. "Already evacuated. Medical transport arrived an hour ago. Everyone's safe." Claire's knees almost gave out. "Everyone?" "Everyone." Morrow's expression softened slightly. "You did good work out here, Harlow. Better than we expected. But this situation's escalated beyond a medical mission. We're pulling you all out." Claire turned to Hale. He looked as stunned as she felt. Get on the helicopter, Morrow said again. That's an order. They climbed aboard. As the Black Hawk lifted off, Claire looked down at the burning compound, the scattered vehicles, the desert stretching endlessly in every direction. And she realized something. She'd gone back to war. And this time, she'd survived. But as the helicopter banked east, heading for safety, Claire saw something that made her blood run cold. In the distance, barely visible in the pre-dawn light, another camp, bigger than Marisol, smoke rising from medical tents and streaming toward it, hundreds of refugees, wounded, desperate, dying. Morrow saw her looking. That's not your problem anymore, Harlow. But Claire knew better. It would always be her problem. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the exhaustion and the fear and the relief, a part of her was already planning how to go back. The part that was already planning how to go back didn't get the chance. The Black Hawk touched down at a forward operating base 300 kilometers from Marisol Station. Claire barely registered the landing. Her mind was still in that tent, hands inside a 12-year-old's abdomen, gunfire rattling the walls. General Morrow was the first off. He didn't wait for them, just walked toward a cluster of prefab buildings like he had somewhere more important to be. Claire climbed out, legs unsteady. Nash caught her elbow. You good? He asked. No, Claire said, but I'm standing. A medical officer approached, young, clean uniform, the kind of person who'd never seen combat. Ms. Harlow, this way, please. Debriefing in 10 minutes. Claire followed him into a building that smelled like air conditioning and fresh paint. Everything here was too clean, too organized, too far removed from the blood and sand and screaming. The debriefing room was small, a table, 4 chairs, a recording device in the center. 2 men in suits sat waiting, not military. Something else. Claire's instincts prickled. Ms. Harlow, the older one said. He had gray hair and the kind of face that gave nothing away. I'm Director Paulson, State Department. This is Agent Riggs, DOD Oversight. Claire sat. What's this about? Your mission, Paulson said. We need to understand exactly what happened out there. I trained medical staff, treated casualties, survived an assault. Claire's voice was flat. That's what happened. Riggs leaned forward. You also participated in an unsanctioned offensive operation against a local militia compound. Claire's jaw tightened. We were defending ourselves by destroying their base, by ending the threat. Paulson raised a hand. No one's accusing you of anything, Ms. Harlow. We just need the full picture. Why? The 2 men exchanged glances. Because, Paulson said slowly, the operation at Marisol Station wasn't what you were told. Claire went very still. Explain. Riggs pulled out a folder. Marisol Station was never just a medical outpost. It was a cover. For intelligence gathering, human intelligence specifically, we had assets embedded in the local population. You used a hospital as a spy operation, Claire said. Her voice was ice. We used resources where we could. The medical work was real, but it served a dual purpose. And the staff? Amina, the nurses? Did they know? No. Claire's hands clenched under the table. So you put them in danger. Put patients in danger. For intel. The militia would have targeted the camp regardless, Paulson said. Medical facilities are always vulnerable in conflict zones. That's not the same as painting a target on their backs. Riggs's expression hardened. We did what was necessary. Necessary for what? Neither man answered. Claire stood. I'm done here. Sit down, Ms. Harlow. No. Claire moved toward the door. You lied to get me there. You used me. And you're trying to justify it by pretending it was all for some greater good. I'm not playing along. Paulson's voice followed her. You signed a contract. You're bound by nothing. Claire turned back. I fulfilled my end. I trained the staff. I saved lives. What you did with that is on you, not me. She walked out. Nash was waiting in the hallway. How bad? Bad, Claire said. They used the hospital as cover for an intelligence op. Nash cursed under his breath. Hale no? I don't think so, but I'm going to find out. She found Hale in the operations center, staring at a wall of monitors showing satellite feeds from across the region. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago, tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. Paulson talked to you. Hale said without turning around. You knew, Claire said. I suspected. Didn't know for sure until yesterday. Hale finally looked at her. They didn't tell me either. I thought it was a straight medical mission. Train the staff, stabilize the region, get out. But it wasn't. No. Hale's voice was bitter. They wanted eyes on the militia, intel on weapons smuggling routes. The hospital was just convenient cover. And everyone who died? The staff who got caught in the crossfire? Collateral damage? Hale didn't answer. Claire moved closer. You brought me into this. You told me it was about saving lives. It was. That part was real. But not the whole truth. Hale met her eyes. Would you have gone if I'd told you? Claire wanted to say no, wanted to be angry enough to walk away and never look back. But she couldn't, because the truth was she would have gone anyway. Kids were dying. Staff needed training. That part didn't change just because there were ulterior motives behind it. I hate you for this, Claire said quietly. I know, but I don't regret going. Hale nodded slowly. Neither do I. For what it's worth. Claire turned to leave. Harlow? She stopped. There's something else you need to know, Hale said. The camp you saw from the helicopter, the big one. What about it? State Department's shutting it down, pulling all international support, too politically sensitive after what happened at Marisol. Claire's stomach dropped. That camp has hundreds of patients. I know. They'll die without support. I know. Hale's voice was hollow. But the decision's already made. We're out. All of us. Effective immediately. Claire stared at him. When? Transport leaves in 6 hours. You're on it. She didn't argue. There was no point. The flight back to the States took 22 hours. Claire slept through most of it, the kind of sleep that came from complete exhaustion, not rest. When she woke, her body ached like she'd been hit by a truck. They landed at a military airfield in Virginia. From there, a car took her to a debriefing center where she spent 3 days answering the same questions over and over. What did you see? What did you do? Who did you treat? Did you witness any unauthorized combat operations? Claire answered truthfully. Mostly. She left out the parts that would get Hale in trouble, the parts that would turn their defensive stand into something the lawyers could twist. On the 4th day, they let her go. No ceremony, no thank you, just a handshake, and a reminder that everything she'd seen was classified. Claire took a cab to the airport and bought a ticket back to Silvergate. She arrived at night. The city looked the same, glass towers, busy streets, people who had no idea what happened in places like Marisol Station. People who never had to know. Claire went straight to her apartment, unlocked the door, stepped inside. Everything was exactly how she'd left it. Clean, organized, untouched. It felt like a museum. She dropped her bag by the door and sat on the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed. 17 missed calls, 34 texts. Most were from Dr. Okonkwo. A few from Kane, one from a number she didn't recognize. She opened that one first. This is Amina. We made it out. All of us. Thank you for everything. You saved more than lives. You gave us the tools to keep saving them. I hope you find peace. Claire stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it. Not because she didn't care, but because keeping it felt like carrying weight she couldn't afford. She called Okonkwo. Claire? Okonkwo's voice was sharp with relief. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm back. I'm fine. Fine. You've been gone a month. Radio silent. We had no idea if... I'm fine, Claire repeated. When can I come back to work? Okonkwo hesitated. You should take time. Rest. Process. I don't need to process. I need to work. Claire, Monday. I'll be there Monday. She hung up before Okonkwo could argue. Monday came too fast. Claire arrived at Silvergate at 6 a.m., 2 hours before her shift. The hospital looked different somehow. Smaller, safer, less real. She changed into scrubs and headed to the surgical floor. The nurses' station was buzzing with the usual morning chaos. Orders being shouted, phones ringing, coffee brewing. Nobody noticed Claire at first. Then someone did. Harlow? A younger nurse, Emily, Claire remembered, stared at her like she'd seen a ghost. You're back. I'm back, Claire confirmed. Word spread fast. Within minutes, staff were stopping by to say hello, to ask questions, to tell her how glad they were she was safe. Claire nodded, smiled, Accepted the attention because refusing it would have caused more problems. But inside, she felt nothing. Dr. Kane found her in the break room an hour later. "You look like hell," he said. "Thanks." Kane sat across from her. "You want to talk about it?" "No." "Okonkwo said you're jumping straight back into work." "That a problem?" "It is if you're not ready." Claire looked at him. "I operated under fire. I trained staff in a war zone. I think I can handle a sterile OR." Kane studied her. "That's not what I'm worried about." "Then what are you worried about?" "That you came back different and you're trying to pretend you didn't." Claire stood. "I need to prep for rounds." She walked out. The first week back was harder than Claire expected. Everything felt wrong. Too slow. Too safe. Too clean. In the OR, she'd catch herself waiting for gunfire. In the hallways, she'd scan for exits. At night, she'd wake up hearing mortars that weren't there. But she didn't tell anyone, she just worked. By the second week, the flashbacks started to fade. The hypervigilance eased. Her sleep improved. She was adjusting, or so she thought. On Wednesday afternoon, Claire was prepping for a routine appendectomy when Dr. Brennan walked into the scrub room. He looked different, thinner, older, like the arrogance had been sanded off. "Harlow," he said quietly. Claire kept scrubbing. "Brennan, can we talk? We're about to operate." "After then." Claire glanced at him. He looked nervous. Actually nervous. "Fine," she said. "After." The surgery went smoothly. Textbook. Claire assisted, Brennan led, and for once, he didn't make a single mistake. Afterward, they met in the hallway. "I owe you an apology," Brennan said, "for how I treated you before. I was an ass." Claire waited. "I thought I was good," Brennan continued. "Top of my class. Fast hands, smart. But watching you work, seeing what you could do under pressure, it made me realize how much I didn't know. How much I still don't know." "You asking for help?" Claire asked. "I'm asking if you'd be willing to mentor me. Officially. I want to learn what you know. The real stuff. Not just textbook theory." Claire considered him. "Why?" "Because I almost killed someone, and you saved him, and I don't ever want to be that helpless again." It was the most honest thing she'd ever heard him say. "All right," Claire said, "but we do it my way, no shortcuts, no ego, just work." Brennan nodded. "Deal." They shook hands. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. That evening, Claire received an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You need to see this." She almost deleted it. Probably spam. Probably nothing. But something made her open it. Inside was a single attachment, a video file. Claire downloaded it, opened it. The footage was grainy, shot from a distance, but clear enough. It showed Marisol Station, before the attack, before the evacuation. And walking through the camp, talking to staff, shaking hands, smiling for photos, was someone Claire recognized, Dr. Miles Brennan. The timestamp was 3 months before Claire had arrived. Claire's blood went cold. She replayed the video, watched Brennan move through the camp like he owned it, watched him talk to people Claire now knew, people who'd never mentioned him. Why? Claire pulled up Brennan's personnel file, scanned his work history. Nothing about overseas deployments, nothing about international medical work. She dug deeper, found a gap. 6 months, 2 years ago, listed as sabbatical. Claire called Hale. He answered on the second ring. "Harlow, what's wrong?" Brennan was at Marisol Station, before me. Silence. "Hale, did you hear me?" "I heard you." His voice was tight. "Where did you get that information?" "Someone sent me a video. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know." Hale sounded rattled. Brennan wasn't part of the operation, at least not officially. "Then what was he doing there?" "I don't know. But I'm going to find out." The line went dead. Claire sat in the dark, staring at the frozen image of Brennan on her screen, and a thought crept in, cold and sharp. What if the intelligence operation wasn't State Department? What if it was something else? What if Brennan wasn't just a resident who'd made mistakes? What if he'd been planted? Claire's hands started shaking. She grabbed her phone and called Okonkwo. "We need to talk. Now." They met at Okonkwo's house, a small brownstone on the west side of the city. Okonkwo answered the door in sweatpants and a Georgetown hoodie, holding a glass of wine. "This better be important," Okonkwo said. Claire stepped inside. "It is." She showed Okonkwo the video, explained the timeline, the gap in Brennan's file, the things that didn't add up. Okonkwo watched in silence. Then she set down her wine. "You think he's a spy? I think he's something, and I think whatever he was doing at Marisol, it's connected to what happened at Silvergate." "That's a hell of a leap, Claire." "Is it? He almost killed Robert Finch. I stopped it. Then suddenly I'm recruited for an overseas mission at the exact place Brennan had been, and when I get back he's apologizing and asking to be mentored." Claire's voice was hard. "That's not coincidence, that's a pattern." Okonkwo rubbed her face. "What do you want to do?" "I want to prove it." "How?" Claire thought for a moment. "His locker, his office, somewhere he keeps things he doesn't want people to see." "That's illegal." "So is espionage." Okonkwo stared at her. Then she sighed. "You're really going to do this?" "Yes." "Then I'm coming with you." They went back to Silvergate at midnight. The hospital was quiet, just the night shift and a few security guards making rounds. Claire knew the schedules, knew the blind spots. She led Okonkwo through the maintenance corridors to the resident's locker room. Brennan's locker was in the back row, standard combination lock. Claire pulled a small toolkit from her pocket, something Nash had given her before she'd left the FOB. "Just in case," he'd said. She picked the lock in 30 seconds. Inside, the locker was almost empty. Scrubs, a spare stethoscope, a protein bar, and a phone. Not Brennan's regular phone, a second one. Burner. Claire powered it on. No password. She scrolled through the messages. Most were in code, strings of numbers and letters that meant nothing to her. But one message was clear. Target confirmed. Extraction in progress. Await further instructions. The timestamp was the day before Robert Finch's surgery. Claire's stomach turned. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew the surgery would go wrong." Okonkwo looked over her shoulder. "Or he made sure it would." Claire's hands tightened on the phone. "He tried to kill Finch, to force me to step in, to expose my skills so they could recruit me." "Who's they?" Claire didn't know, but she was going to find out. She pocketed the phone and relocked the locker. Then she and Okonkwo left the way they came. The next morning, Claire walked into Kane's office and dropped the burner phone on his desk. "What is this?" Kane asked. "Evidence?" Claire said. "That Dr. Miles Brennan deliberately sabotaged a surgery to manipulate me." Kane picked up the phone, read the messages. His face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "His locker. You broke into—" "I did what I had to do." Claire's voice was steel. "He's dirty, and I need you to bring him in." Kane stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. "Security, I need Dr. Miles Brennan detained, immediately." 20 minutes later, Brennan was sitting in a conference room, flanked by 2 security guards. Kane, Claire, and Okonkwo sat across from him. Brennan looked confused. "What's going on?" Kane slid the burner phone across the table. "You want to explain this?" Brennan glanced at it. His expression didn't change. "I don't know what that is." "It was in your locker," Claire said. "Then someone planted it." "Did they plant the video too? The one showing you at Marisol Station 3 months before I arrived?" Brennan's jaw tightened. "Who do you work for?" Claire demanded. "I'm a surgical resident." "You're a liar." Claire leaned forward. "You sabotaged Robert Finch's surgery. You created a crisis to expose my skills. You set me up to be recruited. Why?" Brennan didn't answer. Kane's phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, answered. "This is Kane." He listened. His face darkened. "Understood." He hung up. "That was the FBI," Kane said quietly. "They're sending agents. Brennan, you're under arrest pending investigation into charges of espionage and medical malpractice." Brennan's mask finally cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," Kane said. "You used my hospital. You endangered my patients. You manipulated my staff. You're done." The door opened. 2 federal agents walked in. Brennan stood. This isn't over. Claire met his eyes. Yes, it is. The agents escorted him out. The room fell silent. Okonkwo spoke first. What happens now? Now, Kane said, we cooperate with the investigation, and we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. He looked at Claire. You did the right thing. Claire didn't feel like she'd done the right thing. She just felt tired. Over the next 2 weeks, the story unraveled. Brennan had been recruited by a private intelligence contractor, one with ties to multiple governments and a very loose interpretation of ethics. His job was to identify high-value medical personnel who could be leveraged for overseas operations. Claire had been the target all along. The surgery, the crisis, the recruitment, all of it planned. Brennan cooperated with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. He gave up names, connections, operations that spanned 3 continents. The fallout was massive. 2 hospital administrators were fired. 3 government officials resigned. The contractor was shut down, at least officially. And Claire became famous. Not the kind of famous she wanted, the kind where reporters camped outside her apartment, where her face was on the news, where strangers recognized her in grocery stores. The nurse who exposed a spy ring, the combat medic who wouldn't be silenced, the woman who fought back. Claire hated every second of it, but she didn't hide, because hiding meant they'd won. On a cold Thursday in November, Claire stood in front of a congressional hearing. The room was packed, cameras everywhere, politicians behind a long curved desk, looking down at her like judges. Ms. Harlow, the chairwoman said, thank you for your testimony. Before we conclude, do you have any final statement? Claire looked at the microphone, then at the cameras, then at the people who'd used her. I came back from deployment expecting to go back to work, Claire said, to help people, to teach, to heal. Instead, I found out I'd been manipulated, used, turned into a pawn in someone else's game. She paused. But here's what they didn't count on. I'm not a pawn. I'm not a tool. I'm a person who knows her worth, and I won't be silent when people abuse the systems designed to protect us. She stood. Medical professionals save lives. We don't play games. We don't serve hidden agendas. We show up. We do the work. And we demand better from the people who claim to lead us. Claire walked out of the hearing room to thunderous applause, but she didn't hear it. She just kept walking. A week later, Claire received a letter. No return address, just her name on the front. Inside was a single photograph, the second camp, the one she'd seen from the helicopter, and written on the back, in handwriting she didn't recognize. They're still dying. You're the only one who can stop it. Claire stared at the photo for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Hale. I need a favor, she said. Name it. Get me back in. Hale's silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Claire thought the call had dropped. Then he said, You're serious? Yes. After everything that just happened, the hearings, the exposure, I'm serious, Claire repeated. Get me back in. Hale exhaled slowly. It's not that simple anymore. You're a public figure now. Congressional testimony, media coverage. You can't just disappear into a conflict zone without every reporter in the country asking where you went. Then make it official. Send me as part of a legitimate humanitarian mission. Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders. I don't care. Just get me there. Why? Hale's voice was quiet. You've already done more than anyone could ask. You exposed a corruption network. You testified before Congress. You won, Claire. Why go back? Claire looked at the photograph again. The smoke, the tents, the endless line of people waiting for help that wasn't coming. Because winning doesn't mean anything if people are still dying, she said. And I'm done sitting on the sidelines while bureaucrats argue about jurisdictions and funding. Another pause. I'll make some calls, Hale said. But Claire, this time, you go in with full transparency. No hidden agendas, no intelligence games, just medicine. That's all I ever wanted. The call ended. Claire set down her phone and stared at the photograph until the sun went down outside her window. 3 days later, Hale called back. I got you a spot, he said. International Medical Relief Corps. They're setting up a field hospital at the camp you saw. It's a 6-month deployment, full support, full transparency, and they specifically requested you by name. Claire's chest tightened. When do I leave? 2 weeks. That enough time to get your affairs in order? More than enough. Claire, Hale's voice shifted. This one's going to be harder. The camp's bigger. The casualties are worse, and there's no military backup. Just you and a bunch of civilian doctors trying to hold the line. I know. And you're still going. I am. Hale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're either the bravest person I know or the most stubborn. Can I be both? Hale laughed, short but genuine. Yeah, you can be both. Claire spent the next 2 weeks wrapping up her life in Silvergate. She met with Kane, who tried one last time to convince her to stay. You've built something here, he said, gesturing around his office. The training program, the respect. You're changing how we approach trauma medicine. Why walk away from that? I'm not walking away, Claire said. I'm expanding. What I built here works because I learned it somewhere else. Now I'm taking it back to where it's needed most. Kane studied her. You're not coming back, are you? Claire didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I don't know. But if I don't, it's not because I failed. It's because I found where I belong. Kane stood and extended his hand. Then go do what you do best. Save lives. They shook hands. Claire's last week at Silvergate was a blur of paperwork and handoffs. She documented every protocol, recorded training videos, made sure the program she'd built could survive without her. Dr. Okonkwo insisted on taking her out for dinner on the final night. They went to a quiet restaurant downtown, the kind with cloth napkins and waiters who moved like ghosts. Claire felt out of place in civilian clothes. She'd been wearing scrubs or fatigues for so long that everything else felt like a costume. You look uncomfortable, Okonkwo said, studying her across the table. I am. Because of the restaurant or because you're leaving? Claire thought about it. Both. Neither. I don't know. Okonkwo smiled. That's honest, at least. She sipped her wine. I'm going to miss you. Not just because you're good at what you do, but because you make everyone around you better. That's rare. You did the same for me, Claire said quietly. When I first got here, I was just trying to disappear. You wouldn't let me. Because I saw what you were capable of, even when you were hiding it. Okonkwo set down her glass. Promise me something. What? Don't lose yourself out there. I know what it's like to give everything to the work, to forget there's a person underneath the job. Don't let that happen. Claire met her eyes. I'll try. That's all I ask. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. When they said goodbye outside the restaurant, Okonkwo hugged her tight. Come back alive, Okonkwo whispered. I need someone to remind me that good people still exist. Claire squeezed back. I will. She visited Robert Finch at his home the next afternoon, a modest house in the suburbs with a yard full of toys and a golden retriever that barked at everything. Finch answered the door, looking healthier than he had any right to be. The scar from his surgery was barely visible under his shirt. Miss Harlow, he said, surprised. I wasn't expecting— Come in, please. Claire stepped inside. The house smelled like baked bread and coffee. Children's voices drifted from upstairs. I wanted to see how you were doing, Claire said. I'm great. Better than great. Finch gestured to the living room where his wife sat reading. Because of you. I just did my job. You saved my life. That's more than a job. Finch's voice was thick with emotion. I heard what happened. The investigation. The testimony. What that doctor did to me. To you. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Don't be, Claire said. It needed to happen. And it led me to where I'm going next. She told him about the deployment, the camp, the mission. Finch listened, then nodded slowly. You're going to save a lot of people. I hope so. You will. Finch extended his hand. Thank you for everything. Claire shook it. Take care of yourself. You too. Walking back to her car, Claire felt something shift inside her chest. Not closure exactly, but completion. A circle finished. Robert Finch was alive. His family was whole. And that mattered more than any testimony or headline ever could. On her last night in Silvergate, Claire packed her bags. 2 duffel bags again, basic clothes. Medical supplies she'd bought with her own money. Her old combat boots, worn but still solid. She sat on her bed and looked around the apartment one final time. It had never felt like home, just a place to sleep between shifts. But leaving still felt like something. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nash. Heard you're going back. Need backup? Claire smiled and typed a response. I can handle it. But thanks. You always could. Stay safe, Harlow. She set down the phone and pulled out the photograph from the envelope. The camp. The smoke. The people. Tomorrow she was getting on a plane. Tomorrow she was going back to war. But this time she wasn't running from anything. She was running towards something. The flight to the field hospital took 30 hours. 2 planes, 3 layovers. By the time Claire arrived, she was exhausted, dehydrated, and covered in a fine layer of dust from the last leg on a cargo transport. The camp was even bigger than she'd expected. Rows of white tents stretched across the desert floor like a city made of canvas. Thousands of people, refugees, displaced families, wounded civilians, crowded the spaces between them. The air smelled like smoke and sand and unwashed bodies and fear. A woman in scrubs met Claire at the landing zone. She was in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that had seen too much but hadn't given up yet. Claire Harlow? The woman asked. That's me. Dr. Sarah Mendez, I'm running the medical operations here. She gestured toward the camp. Welcome to hell. Let me show you around. They walked through the camp together. Mendez pointed out the supply tents, the surgical areas, the triage zones. Everything was organized but overwhelmed. Too many patients, not enough staff, not enough supplies, not enough hours in the day. We're getting about 200 new casualties a week, Mendez said. Blast injuries mostly, some gunshots, a lot of infections from delayed treatment, malnutrition, dehydration, diseases we haven't seen in decades because the infrastructure's completely collapsed. We're doing what we can, but we're barely holding the line. What do you need from me? Claire asked. Everything. Mendez stopped and looked at her. I read your file. Combat medic. 6 years deployed. Training experience, congressional testimony. You're exactly what we need. Someone who can operate under pressure and teach others to do the same. I can do that. Good. Because if we don't get better fast, a lot of people are going to die. Claire spent the first week observing, learning the staff, understanding the systems, identifying the gaps. The doctors were competent but slow. They second-guessed themselves, waited for confirmation, hesitated when they should have acted. The nurses were overwhelmed, running between patients, doing triage without clear protocols, making decisions on the fly with no backup. The local volunteers were brave but undertrained. They knew how to bandage wounds but not how to recognize when a patient was crashing. They worked harder than anyone but lacked the framework to work smart. It was Marisol Station all over again, just bigger, more desperate, more impossible. On the 8th day, Claire called a staff meeting. 30 people crammed into the largest tent. Doctors, nurses, techs, volunteers. They looked exhausted, beaten down, ready to quit. Claire stood at the front. No podium, no slides. Just her. I know you're tired, she said. I know you feel like you're drowning. Like no matter how hard you work, it's never enough. Like you're watching people die and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I've been there. I know what it's like. The room was silent. But here's the truth, Claire continued. You're not failing. The system's failing you. You're doing everything right with half the resources you need, maybe less. And that's not sustainable, so we're going to change it. She pointed to a whiteboard behind her. Starting today, we're implementing a new protocol. Triage zones with color-coded tags. Pre-staged supplies sorted by injury type. Dedicated surgical teams with rotating roles. Shifts capped at 12 hours, no exceptions. And most importantly, training. A young nurse raised her hand. Training for what? For everything. Trauma response, emergency procedures, decision-making under pressure, how to prioritize when you've got 10 critical patients and can only save 3, how to improvise when you don't have the equipment you need, how to trust yourself when there's no one else to ask. Claire's voice was firm. By the time I'm done, every single person in this tent will be able to handle a critical case without backup. Because backup isn't always coming, and we can't afford to wait for it. Another hand, an older doctor this time. And if we fail, Claire met his eyes, then we fail. But we fail trying, and we learn from it, and we get better. That's the job. She spent the next 3 months transforming the camp. She ran drills, taught procedures, pushed the staff harder than they'd ever been pushed. Some resented her for it, called her a tyrant behind her back. said she didn't understand how hard they were already working. But others thrived. They learned to move faster, think clearer, trust their instincts. The mortality rate dropped. Response times improved. Complications decreased. And slowly, the staff stopped looking like they were drowning. They started looking like they were fighting back. On a Tuesday in March, a convoy arrived with 37 casualties from a bombing 200 kilometers away. The worst Claire had seen since Marisol. Triage took 12 minutes. Surgical teams were deployed in 15. Within an hour, every critical patient was being treated simultaneously in different zones across the camp. Claire moved between them, supervising, assisting, correcting. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. She didn't panic, didn't rush, just worked. A young surgeon named Dr. Amir Hassan was struggling with a complex abdominal repair in the red zone. His hands were shaking. Sweat dripped down his face. Claire stepped in. "Talk me through it," she said. "Bowel perforation," Amir said, his voice tight. "Multiple sites. I can't get ahead of it. Every time I repair one, another opens up." Claire looked at the wound. "Yes, you can. You're trying to fix everything at once. Prioritize. Which perforation's bleeding the most?" Amir pointed to a site near the jejunum. "Start there. Clamp it, repair it. Then move to the next one. One problem at a time. You know how to do this." Amir followed her instructions. His hand steadied. The repair held. "Good," Claire said. "Now, the next one." She stayed with him through the entire procedure, watching, guiding, not taking over, just supporting. When it was done, the patient was stable. Amir stepped back, breathing hard. "I did it." "You did," Claire confirmed. "And next time, you'll do it faster." By the end of the day, 34 of the 37 casualties survived. 3 didn't. Claire stood outside the morgue tent that night, staring at the bodies covered in white sheets. 3 people she couldn't save, 3 families who'd lost someone. It never got easier. Dr. Mendez found her there. "You did good today," Mendez said quietly. "We lost 3. We saved 34. Without your training, we would have lost 10. Maybe 15. Mendez put a hand on Claire's shoulder. "You can't save everyone. No one can. But you can save some, and today you saved a lot." Claire didn't respond. She just kept staring at the sheets. "Come on," Mendez said. "You need to eat, sleep. You can't run on empty forever." Claire followed her back to the staff tent. But sleep didn't come easy that night. It never did when she lost someone. Over the following weeks, word of the camp's improvement spread. Other organizations reached out, asked for protocols, wanted to implement the same systems. Dr. Mendez brought Claire into her office one afternoon and showed her the emails. "They're calling it the Harlow method," Mendez said. Claire almost laughed. "That's ridiculous." "Maybe, but it's working, and people need it." Mendez leaned back in her chair. "Headquarters wants to expand the program. Use your protocols at other camps. Train more staff. They want you to lead it." "Lead what?" "A training initiative. You'd travel to different camps, spend a few weeks at each one. Teach the staff. Implement the systems. Then move on to the next one." Claire stared at her. "I'm not an administrator. I'm a medic." "You're both. Whether you want to be or not." Mendez's expression was serious. "You've proven that good systems save lives. Now you have a choice. Stay here and help hundreds, or spread this out and help thousands." Claire walked out without answering. She needed to think. That night she sat outside her tent, staring at the stars. The desert sky was endless here. No light pollution, just stars and darkness and the occasional sound of someone crying in the distance. Her phone buzzed. A message on the satellite network. It was from Okonkwo. "Saw the news about the Harlow method. I'm proud of you. Don't forget to take care of yourself." Claire typed a response. "I'm trying." She hit send. Then another message came through, from an unknown number. Claire opened it. Inside was a photograph. Dr. Miles Brennan, in handcuffs, being led into a federal courthouse. And beneath it, a single line of text. "Sentenced to 15 years. Thought you'd want to know." Claire stared at the image for a long time. 15 years. It should have felt like justice, but all she felt was tired. Brennan had used her, manipulated her, put patients at risk for his own agenda, and now he'd pay for it. But the people he'd hurt, the patients, the staff, the system he'd corrupted. They'd carry those scars forever. Justice didn't undo damage. It just stopped it from happening again. Claire deleted the message and set down her phone. The next morning, she told Dr. Mendez her decision. "I'll do it," Claire said. "The training initiative, I'll go to the other camps." Mendez smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. But I have conditions." "Name them." "I choose the camps. I set the timeline. And I don't report to administrators who've never set foot in a field hospital. If someone wants to oversee me, they come out here and do it in person." Mendez laughed. "You don't ask for much, do you?" "I ask for what's necessary." "Fair enough." Mendez extended her hand. "Deal." They shook on it. Over the next 6 months, Claire traveled to 8 different camps across 3 continents. She taught. She trained. She implemented systems. She pushed staff to be better. Some camps embraced it. Others resisted. A few told her she was too demanding, too harsh, too unwilling to compromise. Claire didn't care. She wasn't there to make friends. She was there to save lives. And the numbers didn't lie. Everywhere she went, mortality rates dropped. Response times improved. Staff confidence increased. The Harlow method worked, but it wasn't magic. It was just discipline, structure, accountability, things that should have been standard but weren't. On a warm evening in September, Claire returned to the original camp, the one where she'd started. Dr. Mendez met her at the landing zone with a smile. "Welcome back," Mendez said. "Good to be back." They walked through the camp together. It looked different now, more organized, more efficient. The staff moved with confidence. The patients looked calmer. "You did this," Mendez said. "We did this," Claire corrected. That night, the staff threw a small gathering in Claire's honor. Nothing fancy, just food and music and people who'd worked themselves to the bone and wanted to celebrate surviving another day. Dr. Amir Hassan approached Claire with a cup of tea. "Dr. Mendez told me you're leaving again next week," he said. Claire nodded. "Another camp, somewhere in East Africa. They need help setting up trauma protocols." "There's always another camp," Amir said quietly. "Yeah, there is." Amir was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You changed everything here. You know that, right? Not just the systems, the people. You taught us that we're capable of more than we thought. You were always capable. You just needed someone to believe it. You believed it when we didn't. That's what made the difference." Amir extended his hand. "Thank you." Claire shook it. "You did the work, not me. We did it together." That was true. The next morning, Claire received a package. No return address, just her name on the outside. Inside was a folder. Thick, heavy. Personnel records, photos, documents, all about people like Dr. Miles Brennan. And a note. "He's not the only one. There are more. Attached is everything we have. Use it. No signature." Claire opened the folder. Inside were names, dates, operations, a network of people embedded in hospitals, NGOs, relief organizations, all working for contractors who used medical missions as cover for intelligence gathering, the same network that had recruited Brennan. They hadn't been shut down. They'd just gone underground. Claire's jaw tightened. She picked up her phone and called Hale. "I need you to come here," she said. "Why?" "Because we're not done, and I need your help to finish it." Hale arrived 3 days later with a small team, military investigators, federal agents, international law enforcement. They set up in a secure area of the camp and started going through the documents Claire had received. "This is bigger than we thought," Hale said, staring at the wall of connections they'd mapped out. "They're everywhere. Hospitals, aid organizations, government health agencies. It's a global network." "Then we expose them," Claire said. "All of them. That'll take months, maybe years, and it'll be dangerous. These people don't like being exposed." "I don't care." Hale looked at her. "You're staying, aren't you? Not just for this deployment. Permanently." "I am." Claire's voice was firm. "This is where I'm needed, not in some sterile hospital back home. Not teaching residents who already have every advantage. Here, with people who have nothing except the care we provide." "And the investigation?" "I'll help however I can. Testify if needed. Provide evidence. Whatever it takes. But I'm not leaving the field." Hale nodded slowly. "All right. Then we do this together." Over the next year, the investigation unraveled the entire network. Arrests were made in 12 countries. Operations were shut down. People were held accountable. The scandal made international headlines. Congressional hearings were held. Reforms were passed. And through it all, Claire kept working. She expanded the training program to 17 camps, taught over 1,000 medical personnel, saved countless lives. The Harlow method became standard protocol across major international relief operations. But Claire didn't care about the name or the recognition. She cared about the 12-year-old who survived surgery because a local doctor remembered her training. She cared about the nurse who stopped a hemorrhage because she'd practiced the technique 50 times. She cared about the family reunited because someone had the skills to save a life that would have been lost a year ago. That was what mattered. On a cool morning in November, Claire received a formal invitation. The United Nations wanted her to speak at the General Assembly about trauma care in conflict zones. Claire almost declined. She wasn't a public speaker, wasn't comfortable with cameras and stages and audiences. But Dr. Mendez convinced her. People need to hear from someone who's actually done the work, Mendez said. Not administrators, not politicians, you. Someone who knows what it costs and does it anyway. So Claire said yes. She flew to New York, put on clothes that felt foreign after months in scrubs, stood backstage at the UN and tried not to think about how many people were watching. When her name was called, she walked out to the podium. The room was massive, hundreds of delegates, cameras everywhere, lights so bright she could barely see past the first row. Claire gripped the podium and took a breath. Then she began. I was a combat medic who became a nurse because I wanted to leave war behind, Claire said. But I learned something over the past 3 years. War doesn't just happen on battlefields. It happens in hospital corridors when staff are too afraid to speak up. It happens in boardrooms when profit matters more than patients. It happens every time someone with power decides that some lives matter less than others. She paused. I was underestimated, dismissed, used as a pawn in someone else's game, but I didn't stay silent. I fought back. Not with violence, not with anger, but with competence, with accountability, with a refusal to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. Claire looked directly at the camera. If you're a nurse who's been told to stay in your lane, step out of it. If you're a doctor who's been silenced, speak louder. If you're anyone who's been told you're not enough, prove them wrong. Not because you need their validation, but because the people who need you deserve your best. And you can't give your best if you're hiding who you are or what you're capable of. The room was completely silent. Change doesn't come from the top down, Claire continued. It comes from people like us, the ones who show up every day, who do the work when no one's watching, who refuse to quit even when the system is broken and the resources are gone and the odds are impossible. We're the ones who save lives. We're the ones who matter. And it's time we started acting like it. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted. Applause thundered through the space. Delegates stood. Cameras flashed. But Claire didn't wait for it to end. She walked off the stage and straight out of the building. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Claire stood on the steps and breathed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Okonkwo. Watch the speech. You were perfect. Another from Nash. Damn, Harlow, you made me cry. Don't tell anyone. Another from Dr. Mendez. Get back here. We have work to do. Claire smiled. She walked down the steps and hailed a cab to the airport. 48 hours later, she was back in the field. Another camp. Another team. Another chance to teach people that they were capable of more than they believed. Claire didn't do it for recognition, didn't do it for awards or accolades or speeches at the UN. She did it because it was right, because people deserved care that didn't depend on where they were born or how much money they had, because competence mattered more than credentials, because someone had to stand up and demand better from a system designed to keep certain people invisible. And she'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. Your worth isn't determined by who sees you. It's determined by what you do when no one's looking, by the lives you save when there are no cameras, by the way you show up when it's hard and the work is impossible and no one would blame you for walking away. Claire had been doing that work all along, quiet, steady, unshaken. Now the world was finally paying attention. But more importantly, she'd stopped waiting for permission to be exactly who she was. A combat medic, a nurse, a teacher, a fighter, someone who knew her worth and refused to settle for less. And that, More than any testimony or headline or method named after her was the real victory. She didn't need the world to validate her. She already knew what she was capable of, and she'd spend the rest of her life proving it, not to them, but to the people who needed her most. One patient at a time, one training session at a time, one life saved at a time. That was enough. That was everything.